Today we're going to, I'm going to show you how to trace patterns onto the fabric, cut them out, and then piece them into a row. And so I'm going to begin with the little roof that's on the lighthouse. Okay, you can see it better from this side. The little roof and the strip that's on both sides. And then since I have the red out, I'm also going to cut out this strip here. So the roof, okay, what we want to do is we want to put it on basically what's called the straight of grain. This is called a selvage. It's kind of the finished edge of the fabric, and that goes lengthwise, so you know that that edge is pretty straight. So the other direction of this, the weave of the fabric is also straight. So we want to keep them kind of at the top and the bottom of the piece. So I'm using the pencil to very carefully draw a line. I'm going to make a little dot at each corner too. Okay, and you notice that I kind of angled the pencil in so that I get the pencil as close as possible to the piece of the template. Okay, so again, on this guy, make a little dot. Okay, so now I've traced the two templates so I can see my seam allowance. And now I'm going to cut them out, but I'm not going to cut on the line. I have to cut a little beyond that for what's called the seam allowance, which typically is about 1/4 inch, but with hand piecing it's not that critical. It can be a little bigger or a little smaller, but a little smaller is not really good. So, cutting these out. Okay, so there's those two pieces. So we'll set this one aside for later on because we don't need it right now. Okay, you might want to stop for a minute because I forgot. This particular fabric is somewhat what they call directional, has kind of an up and a down. So we want the top edge of the pieces to kind of go along with the print that's on the fabric. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over. So in other words, instead of tracing the template this way, where you would have sideways clouds, we want the clouds to be right side up, or mostly right side up anyway. Okay, so then we get a pencil and do the same thing. Trace. So we're ready to start to hand piece. Okay, so what I always do is I lay the pieces right side up the way I want it to look. So I want it to look like that. Okay, so this piece is going to go on this piece. Okay, so then what I do is I flip them, one of them, so they're right sides together. And it doesn't matter which side you pin on, but what you're going to do is you're going to put the pin right through the little dot on the one layer, and then poke around until you get the pin to match up with the pin with the corner on the other dot, on the other layer. Same thing with the other end. Right now I'm not finishing the pinning part. Okay, so right through the red dot and right through the blue dot. Okay, so now I want the pins to be pretty much straight up and down, okay, because I want those 2 points to be right on top of each other. So then I'm going to very carefully angle the pins down without shifting it. Okay, so then we go to our needle and thread, and you don't need a lot of thread for this because it's all short seams. And you choose whatever needle you feel the most comfortable with, and or whichever one you can thread the best. Okay, and to do the knot, what I do is I hold the needle between my finger and my thumb with the pointy end up, and I take the long tail, place it between my thumb and the needle, continue holding onto that thread and wrap it around. The more you wrap it around, the bigger the knot's going to be. So then I pinch what I just wrapped and take the other hand and pull the needle through like I'm taking a stitch, and there's the knot. Okay. Now, when we're hand piecing, we don't want all the knots to be piled up into corners because it makes it much more difficult to put rows together and things like that. So what I do is I start a couple stitches away from the corner, going up and down. This is called a running stitch. And then I'd make a U-turn. Now I can take the pin out because I've already sewn in that corner, and then start going backwards. Or actually, it's really forward. Okay. And taking little tiny stitches as I go. Okay, so then after a few stitches, I'll do what's called a back stitch. Okay, so pull it through, and I'm going to go backwards one stitch. So it's the thread's coming out here. I'm going to go back to where it went in before and kind of make a loop. It's going to make like a little circle all the way around, and then continue on like 3 or 4 stitches. Nice small stitches. Okay, and the reason for that is if you do big stitches, then if you tug on the pieces, you'll see the thread going back and forth, and we don't really want to do that. Okay, so every few stitches, back stitch. Okay. Now, one of the mistakes that a lot of people make is that they would say, okay, so now I'm going to come down here and turn down there. No, you're not going to do that because there's no new piece of fabric there yet. If it was like a solid piece of fabric, I would tell you you would be making a pocket instead of a seam. Okay, so I got to the end point here. I'm going to take another back stitch right at that corner, and then I'm going to turn it around and go backwards another couple stitches so I can make the knot away from that corner. Okay, so to make the knot, it's a back stitch. Pull it most of the way through, dive the needle through the loop, and pull it, and repeat one time. Okay, and that's a seam. Okay, now, hand piecing is very different from machine piecing in that with hand piecing, you want to keep your seam allowances out of the way. Okay, with machine piecing, you usually sew all the way from the raw edge to the raw edge, and then you press as you go towards your darker fabric. Okay, so in this case, because we're doing hand piecing, we want to keep that seam allowance free. Okay, so now you can stop for a second, because